This is the Gutsy Health Podcast with Juanique and Tristan Roney. Hey guys, welcome back to the Gutsy Health Podcast.
Hi everyone.
We have a literal treat for you because we're going to be talking about bread today. We have Nathan Hessing on the podcast. And Nathan, I call you the bread guy because as most of my followers know, I don't like grains. I take most of my clients off of grains when we are trying to heal up their guts. But I understand that there is a time and a place for grains.
Yes.
And that's what we want to talk about today. And Nathan, he owns a company. It's called the Time Travelers Bakery.
Correct.
And this is how I met him. This is how we met him. We were at the Provo Farmers Market and we were going by his stand and I was like, tell me about your bread. And he said, this is the bread that people with autoimmune issues can't handle. And I was like, what? Like, does that even exist? And so he's here to educate us on why that kind of bread can exist and why we have gotten to this point in the first place, because we are all sick.
Oh,
right?
yes.
And we're all eating what we call Frankenstein food.
Of course.
Frankenstein wheat. And so Nathan is going to tell us how we got here and how we can move away from it. So,
Yes.
By the way, we really, really love this bread. It's not just that people can handle it. It tastes incredible.
Unbelievable.
People taste it and they're like, wow, this is the best bread I've ever had.
No, it's
And that's what I thought too. Like,
it's so good. Actually, when Nathan brought some into the clinic, we had most of our clinicians there that day and everyone was eating this. They're like, holy cow, this is so good. And then they came in like a few days later, they're like, I just want that bread again. It's really good bread. So,
And we're also going to be giving away the opportunity for people anywhere in the country to get their hands on this. Now,
some starter.
we're not going to ship you some bread. Might not be in such great shape by the time it gets to you, but we're going to send out some starter to 5 people. Is that what we decided?
Yes.
yeah.
To 5
And
people.
instructions on how to make it yourself and how to learn how this process works. So you can like really
Perfect.
get down and dirty in your own kitchen.
So we will tell you how to get yourself signed up for the drawing on that toward the end here.
Exactly.
But just know that this could be yours.
Exactly. So Nathan, tell us about you. Tell us about, because he has a really cool story too of health issues and everyone needs to hear it because they will relate to it. So tell us about you and your health history and your journey and how you started this company.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say thanks for having me on here. This is amazing. I am so happy that I get to tell more people about this bread because it's literally changed my life.
I'm so glad.
The reason why we call our bakery Time Travelers Bakery is because we believe in the phrase back in time, back in health.
Yes.
If
I
you
love it.
go and do things the way that they were done before autoimmune disorders were so rampant, because I believe that they've always been a thing, yes, but they've been a razor's edge fringe thing. And now they are the norm.
Yep.
If you go back in time and make it that old way,
Yep.
then all of a sudden this stuff doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So that's how we make our products is the old way.
Because we ate grains for thousands of years.
That's the way we
Thousands and
survived.
thousands. And then the past 100 years, we can't tolerate it anymore.
Totally.
The past 20 years, we are allergic to it.
Yeah.
We are sick from it.
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have to go back in time.
And I don't know if we've told you this before. We talk to our audience about this all the time, but we are all about getting back to the ancestral
Yes.
ways. In almost every single aspect of life, we are healthier if we do what people did many, many generations ago.
Oh, yeah.
And this is no exception, not a surprise at all to me, but very, very exciting.
Perfect.
Now, before we get into it, I want people to realize our ancestors ate bread and they ate grains and they ate fruits and they ate vegetables and
Full gamut of the diet,
yes,
not just bread
it
or
wasn't-
Cheetos.
or Cheetos or McDonald's.
Yeah,
It wasn't
yeah.
like McDonald's fries and bread, right? It was like whole foods and grains.
Correct.
Because that is still under that umbrella.
Yep.
But it's been Frankenstein.
Yep. And that's very important for me with my autoimmune disorder because, like we were saying, I have a story myself, a health journey, and I do have an autoimmune disorder. It is important that I watch everything that I eat, not just my bread intake. And so that I eat my fruits, my vegetables, and I have a range of colors and everything.
Yes.
But going a little bit more into my journey, growing up, I was a cross country runner, which is very demanding of your body and also very invigorating, really.
Yes.
but I always had chronic fatigue and I never really figured out. I always kind of was like, maybe I get tired more fast than other people, or maybe it's just me and my teenage brain, you know, teenagers get tired. And then I went to college and, college people are tired, or, you know, you're busy, but you don't realize that you are out of the norm until the crap hits the fan, basically.
Yeah.
And what that meant for me was all of a sudden for 5 years, I had full body pain.
Wow. How old were you?
I was 22 when it started, I believe.
Wow. And the chronic fatigue, like when were you tired?
So chronic fatigues like really started teenage type of years, more like 14,
Wow,
15.
that's so young.
And then you were saying like what time of day was I tired?
Or no.
Just
like what year, I guess, like ages and
so
stuff.
So it was like teenage years up to mid 20s.
Yeah.
And I just thought, you know, I'm a busy human because I am a busy human. I'm a huge extrovert. But no, that's not why. You can be extroverted and not be tired. But just kind of discussing this full body pain, my back, lower and upper, shoulders, neck, my head, I would get chronic tension headaches. There was actually a period of time when Excedrin was pulled off of the market because there was a bad batch.
Oh my gosh.
I remember I called my mom and I was like having a breakdown because chronic headaches were part of my life.
Yeah.
And then I had hip pain, knee pain. That's actually where it started. I had falling arches and things got so bad that I actually thought that by the time I was 35, I would probably have some assistance with a walker or a wheelchair.
Oh my gosh.
I actually had a doctor, a chiropractor, tell me I would need like full back surgery by the time I was 30.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. So when we're told these things in our early 20s, it's really scary.
And I was told
really
similar
scary.
things, that knee surgery would be a thing. And
It does a number on you emotionally, right? And you start to have all these stories play in your head about the terrible future. Yeah, and yes.
Which this actually kind of transfers into another one of my symptoms. I had horrible mental health issues. So I had anxiety and depression. And I'm not talking like anxiety and depression that we all experience or even just, you know, our normal quote unquote level of anxiety and depression that's still diagnosable. I had to quit multiple jobs, careers. I went to one of the top business schools in the nation and I graduated and had to quit my career.
Wow.
Because of how horrible it was.
Wow.
And so things were getting really bad. Then I gained 40 pounds because I couldn't take care of myself. And
what were doctors telling you at this time?
So they were telling me, it's coming from your hips. You need to do, you know, this type of physical therapy, or it's coming from your knees, you know, those kind of like coming from the base of your body.
And they were just telling you like, take more pain pills, like all this stuff.
Yes.
Like no one ever told you had autoimmune, you have leaky gut.
No.
Like your body is attacking itself.
It took years for us to get to the idea of autoimmune. But even before we got to that idea of autoimmune, I just kind of was like, I need to go to therapy. I need to go to a therapist and figure some things out.
Yeah.
And here's where things started to get really interesting because I noticed as I went to my therapist, my pain levels started to go down.
Amazing.
Which is crazy. We always forget that the brain is part of our body.
Yes.
That it's a mind, body, spirit connection. Whatever that spirit looks like for you, whatever that brain looks like for you, like all three of them exist and you have to take care of every one of them.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Actually, in our hair analyses, emotions show up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So it measures all these body systems and then emotions. Every time emotions come up, I'm like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Like we got to go there. You know?
And just speaking about emotions, autoimmune disorders usually come up after a traumatic experience, whether it be physical, like a car wreck, or mental and physical, like giving birth and a traumatic experience doing that. That's a very mental, physical, spiritual, all of it experience.
Totally. I totally agree with that.
So I, again, went to therapy. I started noticing some pain levels going down, but I couldn't like eradicate it. It was just kind of like a little tick. Like I could notice I was kind of chipping away at that wall. Then I did an elimination diet, which you guys
we do it a lot. Yep.
Yeah.
I put most of my people on an elimination diet, like, or some kind of
some
catered.
form of removing stuff.
Not
right?
extreme,
Not
because most
formal.
people can't like handle the extreme, but we do the big bad guys, right?
For
Like
sure.
the grains, the dairy, the corn, the soy, the sugar, the peanuts, right?
Yes.
And so you went, did you go on an intense elimination diet? Or?
So it was kind of intense. So it was a modified Whole30, if that makes sense.
Yes.
What I did was I read the whole list of everything that Whole30 says to take out. Then I kind of let that sit in myself and say, which of these do I feel I need to take out first?
I love that. Body intuition.
That's amazing. How did you know to do that?
I love it.
that's just the way I work.
I love it. I love it.
For me, it was also kind of a spiritual thing because I'm a very spiritual person. And I don't think that someone has to believe in God to be spiritual. I do personally, but like that was a very spiritual experience for me. Like just saying my body has worth, my spirit has worth, my brain has worth. Like I need to like honor them and let them speak to me. Thank you.
No, because with my clients, like one of my clients this week, this is so important, and I want to hone in on it so that people that are listening, like you need to be a part of your healing process too. Don't just let people dictate it to you. Don't let me dictate it to you. Don't let a doctor dictate it to you. I had a client, I put her on a protocol, and she did it, and she just wasn't feeling good.
Yeah.
And she texted me, and she's like, I'm taking myself off of all of this because I don't feel good. And I text her back and I said, I am so proud of you for listening to your body and doing that. And she said that text made her bawl, because one, she has been so traumatized. Like she has PTSD from doctors just hounding and hounding and hounding. Had it the same. Yep. And so and I was like, wait, I made you cry. I'm so sorry. She's like, no. It was a very benign text, but you didn't realize like the power you gave back to me. Right. And that, and so her using her intuition and me just being around on the edges, like saying, hey, let's try this direction now.
Yes.
You have to be the pilot on the ship. Totally. Right. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
But it's more than just that, right? It's actually trusting yourself enough to listen to your intuition.
And then also saying, I'm probably going to be wrong or not know some things, and we'll adjust as we go.
Yes.
I'll learn that, oh wait, I don't have to cut out sugar 100%, but I do have to be aware of that. I only eat it in dark chocolate or, whatever, because you have to adjust as you go.
Exactly.
That's part of the learning experience.
Exactly.
So yeah, I did this elimination diet. What I ended up cutting for myself was I cut gluten, dairy, rice, and then like beans, legumes, nuts, that kind of stuff. That naturally limited my sugar intake because when you cut gluten and rice, you're not eating sugar unless you're front of mind saying I would like some sugar, which in my opinion is the only time we should be eating sugar is when it's front of mind. When
it's intentional.
Yeah, exactly. Sugar is not great, but if it's intentional, then that's a little bit different than just having it in everything.
And bringing in that emotional piece of it, doing it, knowing that this is something that I'm going to enjoy and it's going to make my experience more rich.
Yeah,
exactly.
Does have benefits, right? That will help to kind of counterbalance the fact that you're getting sugar.
Correct.
As opposed to all of the hidden sugars, we don't even realize we're getting them.
And you're like, why am I so tired? Whereas if maybe you say, hey, I can eat this because I know that tomorrow is kind of my day off, and it is good for me to have a little bit every once in a while so I can feel like a human because that's important.
Exactly.
So anyways, front of mind is important. And those are the things that I eliminated. When you think about gluten, dairy, rice, and legumes, that's a lot of your nutrients. It's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And me being a tall, slim runner male who had just gained 40 pounds, but still, for me, the weight just boom, fell off, but I wasn't getting the nutrients I needed. For example, I couldn't participate in running, even though I now didn't have pain. When I cut those things out and did the mental health stuff, the pain went away.
Yeah.
And the anxiety and depression, everything that I named earlier, like went away.
Amazing.
The stuff that we thought I was going to have surgery or all this stuff for went away. But still, I couldn't run. I was struggling to get to the nutrients I needed. So I was losing hair. I couldn't do a long car ride to my parents' house because I was too afraid that I would fall asleep on the way there.
Wow.
And the worst thing I would say is with nutrient deficiency, if you're prone to anxiety or depression, you might be able to take bad things out of your diet and have the depression go away. But once you get nutrient deficient, the depression might start coming back, which is what happened with me. And I was just like, everything that I'd taken out, I was okay with taking out with, except for wheat. I was like, I feel like this is important.
Yeah.
I feel like it's really important that I figure this out. So I just started doing research, and that's what led us to figuring out how people can have wheat and how people can have gluten back in their lives again.
So let's start there then.
Yes.
What went wrong? Because grain is so toxic.
Right.
Yes.
It's so toxic. So how did we mess this up?
Okay. So there's two key points that I discovered in my research and in my journey of figuring out how to get wheat back.
Before you go into that, are you now eating like nuts and legumes again? You've healed it. You've reintroduced everything, healed your leaky gut.
Yep.
You can eat like the whole spectrum of food.
Yep.
Awesome.
I can eat everything except for just like your normal grocery store milk off the shelf. It doesn't hurt me, but it does make me constipated, if I'm going to be honest. But I can eat any like high ferment dairy, like, you know, like the cheese that they would have eaten back when.
Yes.
Back in time, back in health.
Yes, exactly.
They didn't eat as much just raw dairy. They did, but even their dairy had natural probiotics in it that came from the cow.
Totally.
But we strain that out in the natural process that we put it through now. So
okay, so where we went wrong.
Okay, so where we went wrong. There's 2 key points that we went wrong on. One is natural leavening or fermentation. And then the one that we really want to get into today was wheat quality. So first thing I want to talk to you guys about is wheat quality, if that's okay.
Please.
Yes. So wheat quality. If we take the phrase back in time, back in health, let's talk about ancient wheat. Ancient wheat wasn't cleaned or treated with chemical processes. Those processes and those chemicals didn't even exist back then. And to kind of get a little bit deeper into that, modern wheat sometimes contains what are called desiccants, which we have referred to. One of them is called glyphosates.
Yes.
Glyphosates are commonly marketed under the name Roundup. Roundup is weed killer. We do apply it directly to our wheat supply in America, and that is often applied 7 to 10 days before it is harvested to be harvested basically to go to market.
Right.
The reason why we apply these desiccants, one of them being glyphosates, is because what they do is they actually dry the wheat out. They kill it and then dry it out so it's ready to harvest.
So it's dead and now they're harvesting it.
Correct. But they do the manual killing. Whereas if you don't use a desiccant, Mother Nature, the sun, naturally dries that wheat out, and it does have a dying process, and you harvest it and then you eat it. But we are manually killing it and saying, oh, that thing that we're using to kill the wheat won't be a problem for you though.
No
And it's like,
No.
So
we actually did an episode, you guys, on glyphosate.
Yeah.
So go back and listen to it, because scientists say it doesn't harm your proteins and your cells, but it does harm the species in your gut bacteria.
Yep. And I would believe that.
So that is where the issue comes in, where it's destroying the species down there that help with amino acid, like synthesis, protein synthesis. So if you like gut biome, don't eat glyphosate.
Totally.
Basically. So keep going.
So along with that, adding those glyphosates, those desiccants, ancient wheat contained no additives or bromates. So an additive is what we do with our wheat now is we generally pull off different things, the bran, as well as different parts of it to make it more of a milky white wheat. But in doing that, we usually pull out a lot of nutrients. So we have to add nutrients back into it manually rather than just using the nutrients that were already in it.
Which is so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Why do we do this? We do this with cereal too.
Do
We
it.
add back in like
all
B
of our
vitamin, all of our foods. It's
Yep.
ridiculous.
It is. Even though those nutrients were already there, but we decided to take them off to make it more approachable to the palate. But it's just like, actually, if you make it the old way, it tastes even better.
Yes.
So along with us adding additives, we add what's called bromates nowadays. Bromates are made to make the dough have a better tension and structure,
Right.
which we pay for that dearly because bromates are actually identified as potentially carcinogenic substances by the FDA.
Yep.
America has not outlawed them, even though many European countries have. I could read you a
Tends
long
to be
list
the
of them.
story.
I know,
Yes.
like that constantly happens with all products.
Yes. And then we can talk about 2 more things. Hybridization, which is the crossbreeding of wheat over time. Every type of plant is going to be naturally hybridized. And if not naturally hybridized, there is a certain level of hybridization that is appropriate for a farmer or someone to do because we are part of Mother Nature as well. So we can work symbiotically.
Exactly.
But the thing is are we doing so much hybridization that it's a different thing than it ever was?
And our bodies can't even adapt to that because we've changed it so
We're hybridizing it faster than our bodies hybridize. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Because we tend to coexist with nature. When nature gets a little more rough and tough, we get a little bit more rough and tough. But this is like over decades, right? When we are hybridizing things like this, it's literally within like a year or 2.
Correct.
And now our bodies are like, oh, this is a completely new substance that I'm not used to digesting. And now it's a toxin.
And it's a balance thing because we used to care about balance and now it's all about marketability.
Correct.
So they are willing to sacrifice a lot of the
Quality.
underlying function and quality to get a more marketable product. It's like what we do with dogs, right? We breed them into this state where they have hip problems and back problems
and nasal problems,
eyesight issues and all of that, but they look really good.
Oh, and to take the example of dogs further, think about who dogs' ancestors were. They were wolves,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Now think about a Chihuahua.
I know.
Okay, our modern
Right?
wheat, our modern wheat is literally
It's the
called
Chihuahua.
dwarf wheat.
Oh my
Dwarf wheat.
gosh.
Ancient wheat grew tall. I'm 6'2". It grew almost as tall as me sometimes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And modern wheat will hit my knee, maybe my hip if we're lucky, but usually my knee.
And that's because we've changed it so much.
So we're eating the Chihuahua of wheat nowadays.
Wow.
And like you might love
Chihuahua
Chihuahuas, but
wheat.
like, hey, they're not wolves. So,
I love it.
okay. And then, so now let's just talk a little bit about fermentation, and then we'll go kind of more into history, what history really did to wheat and how we can go back.
Can I add something
Yes,
really
go for
fast?
it.
Like, because wheat is hybridization the same as like GMO?
It's different.
It
I'm
is?
so glad you brought that up.
Okay.
Because I actually have a lot of customers say, is this non-GMO wheat? The answer is yes, it's non-GMO wheat.
Yeah.
So is pretty much all wheat that you're going to find.
Interesting.
GMO wheat is not currently legal
Oh.
in America.
Give it a minute.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
okay.
but it's quickly there.
Yeah.
Like and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot on the market, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But hybridization is very closely linked with GMO. Hybridization is going to be where we take wheat is a type of grass. So we're going to take this type of grass that grows really short, and then we're going to crossbreed it with the natural normal wheat that grows really tall. So it'll grow shorter and be more resistant to like falling over in the wind or something.
Gotcha.
But then we're also going to crossbreed it with this guy, so it has better shelf life, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy. And once you just crossbreed with everything,
Yeah.
you have a Frankenstein. That's what Frankenstein was.
Yes.
He was someone's arm, some guy's leg, some guy's head, you know?
Exactly.
And so it is a Frankenstein.
I want to go back to the so it's more shelf stable. So they've actually bred wheat now to have more phytic acid and lectins in it. And if anyone's listened to our anti-nutrient podcast, those things are really hard for your gut to metabolize because that's Mother Nature's natural preservative.
Yeah.
That's how Mother Nature preserves herself with fiber and with lectins and phytic acid, which are anti-nutrients, which are kind of like microdosing on poison for us, but typically we have really hardy guts,
Yeah.
so we can handle it.
Yeah. And in normal amounts.
And
it's
in
probably
normal
appropriate.
amounts.
And
But
if
now
that's the only thing that we're doing to our bodies in small amounts,
and
which
then
it never
it's
is.
appropriate, right? Because hormesis, you know, like little microdosing on stress here and there.
Yeah.
But no, we're doing it for breakfast. We're doing it for lunch. We're doing it for dinner. We're putting it in baby's milk, right? To you know, we're putting cereal in their milk now. Their first foods is cereal.
Yeah.
And now they're microdosing on this really, really hard, like potentially toxic substance that's hard to digest. And they're babies.
Yeah.
Their GI tract isn't fully like functional yet. They're
sure.
still figuring out their microbiome.
Yeah.
You know, and now we're throwing in glyphosate and they're very, very like, what's the word I'm looking for? Young, like GI
Non-developed.
tracts. Non-developed. Exactly.
Think about your school doesn't even connect
Exactly.
until after you're born. Like your GI
Right.
tract probably isn't developed either.
Well, you don't have a fully functional, like your adult microbiome only comes in at around ages 3 and 5. So we're giving them these first foods at like 6 months old,
Yeah.
right? Like they don't have all the bacteria necessary to help them digest proper foods. And now we're giving them these frankenfoods that have a lot of phytic acid, a lot of lectins.
Yeah.
And so we're setting them up for failure. We're
Totally.
starting the leaky gut before their gut even had a chance.
Yeah.
And that is where our problem is.
Yeah. And that comes from things like hybridization.
Exactly.
And to find a low level hybridized wheat is really hard.
Yeah. So does that mean organic wheat is still hybridized?
So that's organic is a catch-22. You guys have probably noticed it's a great thing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But just because it says organic
Yes.
doesn't mean let's run to the bank with it.
Can you
Exactly.
explain, like, take us down this rabbit hole? Because I want people
Yeah.
to understand this. Because when people are like, I use my organic wheat and
Yeah.
for my sourdough starter, and I'm like, but you're still having gut issues.
Yeah.
So explain this to us so that we can understand it.
So just because it's organic, that doesn't mean it can't be heavily hybridized, heavily crossbred.
Yeah.
Organic is usually, to my understanding, I do not know everything, but to my understanding in this being my business,
Yeah.
it is going to be focusing more on things like pesticides. Glyphosates, they're not going to be touching those. So that's
Yes.
wonderful that they're doing organic for that
Yes.
purpose. Things like bromates, they won't be dealing with that. But those hybridized things that are actually like grown into the plant itself, that can still be there.
Right. So it's still hard to digest.
Yeah.
It will still tear up your gut.
Yeah.
It'll still cause leaky gut, even though it's organic.
Yeah.
Because now you don't have the glyphosate, but you still have the high amount of phytic acid, which is shelf stable, but not digestible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then, so now let's go a little bit into what fermentation is, because we've talked about wheat quality.
Okay.
So fermentation, all throughout time, we have records dating all the way back to the Egyptians, and I'm betting it happened before then because the Egyptians are kind of some of our earliest like intelligent records.
Yeah.
But so we know that pretty much all throughout time, instead of using lab produced yeast, they used fermentation to rise their bread.
So lab produced yeast, is that most of the yeast that we're eating right now?
If something has yeast in it, if you went to the store and bought a yeast packet or anything like that, it is lab produced yeast.
Okay.
Natural yeast or fermentation, the way that works is you get a carbohydrate and a liquid. For us, it's flour and water. You mix those two together. There are actually probiotics in the air all around us. We breathe them in every day, and our body actually naturally has them inside of us. So this carbohydrate and water combination, those probiotics in the air actually attach to the carbohydrates and start feeding off of them. Once they gain a relationship with it, it becomes basically a base for fermentation.
Cool.
And once it gains a relationship to where those probiotics have really like grown a lot, and it's just like really rich and full of probiotics. So with that, and that's what a sourdough starter is.
Gotcha.
Is it's flour, water, and then all the probiotics that attached to it from the air.
Gotcha.
Ours is about 16 years old, so it has a really hearty relationship with those probiotics.
Your sourdough starter.
It is.
It's like you created a mother sourdough, 16 years, and it just keeps going.
Yes, and we like the age 16 personally for us, because some people will say, oh, well, mine's 150 years, which more power to them. That's wonderful. It probably has a great relationship with probiotics. We like the 16-year-old starter because it tends to give you a robust flavor, but also a milky undertone.
Oh.
So it's strong. It's 16 years old. You know, it knows what it's doing with its life. Or at least they say they do.
All 16-year-olds think so.
But it also has some like bendability, some like milky flavor that's underneath it, which we really like.
So wait, I'm like, okay, you got to explain bread to me like I'm 5, because I've never heard 16-year-old sourdough starter.
Yeah.
Like there's ages to sourdough.
There is.
I've never heard anyone say my sourdough is like 10 years old or 30 years old or 2 years. Like I've never heard that.
So what you do is you mix your carbs, so your flour and your water, and then those probiotics kind of attach to it. And then everyone here knows what rotting is, and not everyone knows what fermentation is. Rotting and fermentation are very closely linked.
Yeah.
Basically, fermentation is the sister that's taken care of, and rotting is the stepsister that no one loves. So if no one loves you, you're not going to get new clothes, and you're going to become a menace to society, and you're going to poison everybody. But if people feed you regularly, take care of you, then you're going to help other people, right?
Gotcha.
So fermentation is rotting that has been taken care of, and so that it can actually benefit you with its probiotics.
That's really great. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy. Holy cow.
So starters basically are, we get that flour and water, we mix it together, and then we continually feed it with more flour and water so it doesn't go to rot.
Very cool.
How do you keep it 16 years old? Do you have like a new one every year? Or?
So like I was saying, is 16 years ago, there was flour and water mixed together, right? And then on a regular basis, we add more flour and water to that. So that way it doesn't eat through all the carbs and go down to start rotting. So as long as we continually feed it, then it won't eat through everything and turn to rot. Okay. And that's why you have to continually feed them. But here's the thing, you also continually use them. So you feed it, and you will also pull some of that out and use it as yeast in your bread.
Yeah.
So that's great. As long as you're consistently baking, you're consistently feeding, and it's going to be fine.
Love it.
So, and for those of you who do win this giveaway contest, by the way, you're going to get instructions on how to take care of your starter as well as make bread.
And this is the 16-year-old starter.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
So let's go a little bit more into why fermentation is actually important, though.
Okay.
Fermentation is really, really extremely important because it pre-processes gluten and carbs. Now, some people say, oh, but I tried authentic, real fermented sourdough and it didn't work for me. What we do is what's called a double ferment. Most of the time when you make an authentic sourdough, it's going to mean that it's sitting out in a room temperature environment for 8 to 10 hours as its fermentation time. We double that time. 8 hours becomes 16 hours. So it goes 16, 17 hours is about what we do.
Okay.
Because we have found that is the amount of time and the temperature that's going to make enough fermentation so a lot of people with autoimmune disorders can eat it. If it's any time outside that window, I cannot eat the bread.
Interesting.
If any of our recipes are not in the right temperature and time window, it hurts my stomach.
All right, everyone listening, this is one of the reasons why we absolutely love the spread, because we know that Nathan is not going to sell something that he himself cannot handle.
We test everything on my wife, who actually has a gluten intolerance.
Amazing.
It causes her headaches and stomach aches.
Yes.
And then myself, who has an autoimmune disorder.
Yes.
And if it doesn't hurt her, it might hurt me. If it does hurt me, we never release it to market until it's perfected.
So you're still very sensitive to grains.
Correct.
Very.
And I think I always will be, and I'm grateful for that, because I think it's important to be aware.
Because now you are like the thermostat in your company. You're like, oh, does it pass my test? Nope. Okay, we can't sell this.
Totally.
That's amazing.
And even still, with me being sensitive to them, I believe that they have strengthened my gut and given me the ability to have, rice, legumes, all those things back.
Well,
So,
and I want to touch on that really quick, because yes, an elimination diet, it's a great short-term solution to healing gut.
and to figure out what your issue even is.
Exactly. So we're taking out some of the most inflammatory, potentially heavier foods on your gut.
Yeah.
And then we're healing it up. But there is one thing that happens if we keep doing this for a long period of time, for longer than 3 months. We start losing our microbiome diversity, because the average American eats 15 foods and rotates 15 foods over and over. That is not a recipe for diversity in your gut biome, right? And so that's why it's so important to reintroduce foods again and make sure that you are feeding multiple species, multiple foods, and you're rotating your foods, and you're eating 50 different kinds of foods, 100 different kinds of foods, because that's what we did in the old days.
And we did a lot of fermentation.
Tons of fermentation.
Strengthens the gut biome as well.
Exactly. And so getting good grain, not Frankenstein grain, not glyphosate sprayed grain, fermented grain, to help add to your microbiome, to help break, because it metabolizes the gluten proteins anyway. So it's doing some work for you.
Yeah.
There is a time and a place for grain.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, that's the one thing when I'm like, I have to put you in food prison for a little bit. That's the one thing that they're like, will I ever get to eat bread again? And my answer has always been, I don't know.
Right.
But now that we have found you guys,
It's a lot more likely.
I am way more likely to be like, yes, and it can only be this. It can only be this way.
And actually, now that you even say that, I just want to list some of the disorders that we have helped people with.
Yeah.
Awesome. Please do.
So we have helped many people with Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
Who that Hashimoto's is inextricably linked with gluten.
Totally.
Every
No
doctors who don't believe in the gluten thing will tell you, no, you can't have gluten with Hashimoto's.
So true.
And the other day we had a couple who both have Hashimoto's. Both of them came back and they're like, works for both of us.
Amazing.
It works for Hashimoto's people. We have fibromyalgia, myself. We have, what is it called with ulcerative colitis? We have your basic sensitivities. We also have some people who have celiacs. I never recommend a fermented clean wheat to a celiac. I've never said you should eat this, but some people say, I want to try it. And then they come back and they say, I want to keep seeing how this works for me. And they keep doing that. And if someone wants to do that, I just recommend that they're in close relationship with their doctor.
Yeah.
Because with celiacs, the gluten actually does hurt your gut biome really badly. So we want to make sure that you're in close proximity to a doctor with that.
Right.
And then we've helped so many other people with a huge wide array of all these different autoimmune disorders like Graves' disease and all these other ones that, they're all such long names that I'm not remembering them right now, but
there's over 100 different autoimmune issues now. And that list keeps bouncing up and up and up. And it's like, people are like, why is this happening? It's so weird.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look at our environment.
Yeah.
Our environment is hostile to our digestive tract, and our digestive tract governs our immune system.
Totally.
So, okay. So can you tell us about your guys' wheat? Where do you get it from? How did you find it?
For sure. So we actually source our wheat from Southeast Idaho. It's very important that when you're trying to source clean wheat that you talk to the suppliers themselves.
And do you know your supplier really
do.
well?
Yes,
Awesome.
we do. And we've interviewed them multiple times. We actually interviewed them again this week because we're like, we tell our customers this, and we want to, even though you asked you before, we're about to do a podcast. We need to just reconfirm everything.
Yes,
so we did.
Yes.
And something that's crazy about this wheat, when I first got it, I was like, this is whole wheat. It is white wheat. And it has that like nice, approachable flavor that we love in the bad white bread.
Exactly.
But it's whole wheat. This wheat is natural. Hard white winter wheat that grows in a natural white, kind of like milky, approachable flavor. That's actually normal. It's been a big marketing thing that we've said things have to be of a red or a brown color in order to be whole wheat.
Right.
Every product that we make, from our cake to our noodles to our bread, all of it is whole wheat, even our cake, like I said. And it's because you can do that. And then of course like I said, we interview our suppliers directly. It's important to ask them those hard-hitting questions about glyphosates, about chemicals in general. Our wheat, again, has 0 chemicals applied to it, even during the cleaning process.
So how did this supplier get non-Frankenstein wheat?
Yeah.
Like, do you know?
I don't know.
That's probably like a trade
full
secret,
story, to be honest with you. But I do know that it has been in the family for a very long time. So if I'm going to get down to it, they got it because their family has been doing it for a long time. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to mention a couple more things about fermentation. So we do, again, a double heavy ferment, which breaks down gluten and carbs. So they're pre-digested for you. It's almost like having a stomach outside of you that does the work. Great.
Yeah. Yes.
So not only does it break down those gluten carbs for you, when it breaks down those carbs, it actually lowers the GI of the carbs. What that means is when someone eats sugar or when they eat normal bread, their blood sugar, boom, shoots up, which is very bad for you, whether you have insulin resistance or not.
Which is why I take everyone off of grains, because of that insulin spike. Yes, it's one of the reasons, because I'm just like, you can't, and my clients said,
it's really hard on you to have
so
those.
hard. And you know what's interesting is everyone over COVID started making sourdough bread. And I kept having clients be like, I keep gaining weight. And I'm like, because you're eating starchy food. You know,
right.
and they're like, but it's sourdough. And I'm like, it's still starchy.
Yeah.
So you're saying that this doesn't increase blood glucose and insulin.
So what we're doing is, again, a double heavy ferment. And what it does is anything that you eat that has some carb structure is obviously going to cause some blood insulin release.
Broccoli will.
Yes.
Yes.
But what the difference is low GI versus high GI. Low GI means that when it releases into your bloodstream, it releases slowly. It looks like a curve, a friendly curve.
Yes.
Now, when it's high GI, it releases fast. Boom, sharp spike, like a knife, because that's what it does to you.
Yes. And it's like whiplash. It's hormonal whiplash.
Exactly. And we feel that.
Imagine someone being really happy and then like yelling at you the next second, right? That's what your hormones are doing. They're like, holy cow, something's coming here, right?
Yeah.
And our bodies aren't supposed to have those fluctuations and that whiplash and hormones.
And we talked a little bit about people, the type of disorders that people have that can eat this. We have people that have insulin resistance that obviously are very aware of their insulin levels.
Yes.
Ours is the only bread they can eat.
That's amazing.
The only bread. And so it's really helpful to a lot of people.
That's really cool. Now, is that because again, grains are grainy, they're starchy. Like, do you know why that's happening?
So when you use a normal yeast, you're again using a lab produced yeast. And the reason why we made lab produced yeast is so that it could be fast acting, so that it could make bread fast, because modernity equals fast, but that also equals other drawbacks. So with that fast acting yeast, the probiotic in our yeast is called lactobacillus. You notice the word lacto?
Because that's in your gut.
Yeah. So you also like lactic acid and things like that. And also if you were to get a bottle of probiotics, lactobacillus is going to be in there. It's one of the most common probiotics. But anyways, what I was meaning to say is lacto often is with the word acid. So because this starter has an acidic element to it, it's able to break things down heavily.
Yeah. So like you said, it's digested now. It's pre-digested. It's already broken down that starch.
Yep. Whereas a normal yeast, because it's fast acting and doesn't have an acid element to it, it will not break down as deeply.
Gotcha.
So that the lab produced yeast has really taken away that pre-digestion.
So is that true for all sourdough breads, or because yours has been like double fermented?
That's a really good question. So if you go to the grocery store today and buy some sourdough, probably none of the health benefits that I have said will apply. Here's the reason. First of all, their wheat supply is grocery store wheat. So there's that.
Right.
But second of all, if you go to the grocery store and buy sourdough, 9 times out of 10, it is not even real sourdough. What they do at the grocery store is they will use starter, yes, like I've explained, but they will also mix it with lab produced yeast so that it's still fast acting.
Gotcha.
And on top of that, because the ferment doesn't get as heavy and so it doesn't give as much flavor, they add things like vinegar and other fermented things to it. To give it the flavor, but they don't realize that sourdough isn't about flavor, it's about health.
Right.
And so a lot of people will come to us and they say, oh, I don't like sourdough. And then they try it and they're like, oh wait, I like sourdough.
Yeah.
And it's because they've only had grocery store sourdough.
Right.
Who likes the flavor of vinegar? No one. Like if you like vinegar chips, that's great. That's wonderful. But often if we add vinegar to things, it's not the most approachable flavor.
Right.
So people don't like grocery store sourdough for taste, but also for health.
And so if someone goes and makes sourdough at home,
yes,
like, so that sugar spike isn't going to happen because it's
correct.
sour. It's fermented.
As long as they ferment it deeply enough, and the deeper they ferment it, the less of a spike they're going to get.
Okay.
And obviously I can't say there's not going to be any, carbohydrate reaction. You are eating a carbohydrate, but you're eating a much safer
and we can verify what you've said, because when you brought that loaf in, we had some people come and try it and test their blood sugar. They didn't get the spikes that they usually get from it.
That's really great.
So
that's really cool.
It's really cool.
Love it.
Do you guys kind of want me to go into a history element, or where do we want to go from here?
How are we doing on time?
We're at like 41
We've got some
minutes.
time, so we can.
So we'll just do a quick overview of just kind of what the history of wheat has looked like. Because again, this is how we started. We said back in time, back in health. Let's see what things really were like. So starting with ancient Egypt, that's again kind of some of our first intelligent records. We know in Egypt, you can actually find remnants of sourdough starter or natural leavening on like adobe structures in Egypt, which is really cool.
Yeah.
There are ancient strains of wheat that we can find in Egyptian tombs, such as what is branded as kamut. Kamut is a brand. It's not actually a grain. So we actually know how to source what's called Khorasan, which is the actual grain. Kamut, again, is a brand, but we do source Khorasan, which you'll find that on our website if you want to order some of that as well.
Very cool.
And this Khorasan was found in ancient tombs. And that's how they got that ancient grain and brought it into modernity.
So are you saying that the grain they found was like viable? They were able to...
they were able to get grain from there. And like, I don't know what the process looked like fully, but that's kind of where the baseline started from for them.
That is so cool.
And then also kind of going along that line of like wheat being able to be preserved and stuff. The Bible, which again, just looking at it as a historical document rather than religious, the Bible says Egypt survived a famine via a storage of wheat. I think that that's historically accurate. I really do.
So can you tell us a little bit about what the different kinds of, like, what are your most favorite grains? What should we be gravitating towards? Because I hear a lot of like, what's the one that
probably
your mom
heard of
likes?
einkorn,
Einkorn,
kamut.
yes.
Kamut again is a brand.
One that my mom really likes.
So einkorn is a great grain. It is also more of an Egyptian ancient grain. That grain is going to have more of a nutty flavor. It doesn't have as high of a gluten content, which might sound like a wonderful thing, and for some it is. But here's the thing. It's really hard to bake with. You can make wonderful pancakes, cookies, things that you can make gluten-free relatively easily. You can make with
things
einkorn.
that don't have to rise too much.
Correct. But if we're going to talk like a bread, you need some of that gluten support to make the bread.
Okay.
Einkorn is a great product though, and it does produce good things. It's just limited in what types of things it can produce.
Okay.
And then Khorasan, or again, it is branded as kamut, but Khorasan, the grain, is another good one. It's going to behave a lot like einkorn. Okay. And it's going to have that nutty texture. It's going to have, or not texture, but rather flavor. And it's going to have a little bit less of that gluten content.
Okay. So the one that you guys have is specifically...
Correct. Ours is wheat. Ours
is just straight up wheat.
Correct.
Real wheat.
And so ours is going to date back to pioneer times. There wasn't all that heavy hybridization and crossbreeding and crazy stuff happening in pioneer times. So let's, I guess, kind of keep going down this timeline and get to pioneer times. And
totally.
Go from there.
Are there, before we do, because I feel like knowing more of like the different types of grains, What other ones should people be gravitating towards?
Yeah, spelt. Spelt is another great one.
Okay.
And spelt is actually one of the lowest on the GI table. We discussed GI earlier. Because it's lower on that table, it's not going to spike your blood sugar as much.
Yeah.
And also it is a lot easier for people with gluten issues and things to work with.
Can they like do the ferment thing with that?
They can.
They can.
Yes.
So they can ferment that one. They can't ferment einkorn. Is that correct?
You can ferment any grain that we've named here.
You can.
Any one.
Okay.
It's just going to depend on the gluten content as to what kind of result you're going to see for rising in breads.
And you know what? You do classes on this, right? Because I feel like this should be a class because I don't know anything about baking with grains. I've tried to keep things alive. I can't even keep my plants alive. So I'm like, I'm not going to feed sourdough because it's intimidating. Like, isn't that weird? Like I'm intimidated by grains. They just seem really hard to work with.
Totally.
Because part of me, like I've just, from what I've learned, I'm like, well, they're inflammatory anyway. So why would I even want to get to know these guys?
Right.
Totally.
Like they spike blood sugar. They cause a lot of GI distress. Like why even invest time into this? So you have classes where you teach people how to do this. You teach people how to identify the good parts of each grain.
Totally.
Do you recommend everyone uses a wide variety of grains all the time?
I think wide variety is wonderful. I prefer wheat as my base just because that's kind of what has been throughout history.
Yeah.
But that's because of what I've been able to do to get it back.
Yeah.
So not everyone, that's not going to work for everyone. Sometimes for some people, it's like quinoa's got to be my base, or which was my base for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Quinoa, potatoes, oats, those kind of things.
And quinoa is a seed.
It is. It's not even actually technically
it's not
a
even
grain.
a grain.
It is not. You're right. And so really the only grain I was having during that time was oats.
Yeah.
Because you're right. It's not even a grain. It just kind of
when
gives
people
us
ask
some
me,
of
I'm
that.
like, I always say oats and quinoa. Like if you have to eat something that's carby, like make sure it's really good oats. Make sure like you're not
Make
reacting
sure there's
to
no
that.
glyphosates
There's
in it.
no glyphosates.
Which
And-
is a good thing to go organic on. Organic oats are a great option.
Yes.
But yeah.
So, okay, sorry. Let's finish the history thing
Yeah.
because I kind of like
No, you're
sliced in the middle
totally
there.
fine. So yeah, spelt is another great option. Cahorsan. We don't currently carry einkorn at our store, but you can always go on our shop and buy any of our grains too. So now let's just talk the Bible times. We talk about bread all throughout the Bible. We talk about unleavened bread, meaning there was leavened bread. The only leaven they had back then was sourdough starter. They didn't have labs to make yeast.
Yes.
We have literally a parable of the leaven in the Bible. Christ himself is called the bread of life, which whether he is, the son of God or whatever, he is a important historical figure for that period. So referring to him as the bread of life is going to mean that bread was,
They
that
did
was
a
their
lot.
nutrients. That was their base.
Exactly.
So just popping over now to pioneer times, which this is the time that our grains were coming from, pioneer times. During this time, there is a huge likelihood, in fact, it's beyond likelihood, it's fact, that people survived heavily off of fermented foods, which was great for their gut biome, great for just having all types of things all year round and real food year round. Some families actually have sourdough starts brought across the plains by their pioneer ancestors. We live in the Northwest, we're in the Utah area. So there's a lot of people who have pioneer ancestry here and are proud of it.
Right.
And they have, 150-year-old, 200-year-old starters from those people.
That's really cool.
Something about the pioneers, again, most of the West was settled by people who like either drug hand carts or like had oxen pull things across the nation, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So weight was really important. You didn't want to bring all of your heavy antiques with you because you wouldn't make it. You would probably die if you brought all that stuff.
Yeah.
So weight was important. Adults could only bring 15 pounds of personal items with them.
Wow.
That's insane.
And 13 to 17, somewhere in there. So 15 is a good median to go with.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's the thing. Along with their personal items, every adult was assigned 200 pounds of flour
That's insane.
because they knew
That's what they had to eat.
every pound of that flour was worth the steps that they had to drag it across the nation. They knew there's no way I'm going to get there unless I bring this with me.
Right.
And do you think pioneers could have walked across the nation on Wonder Bread? No.
No.
The only reason why this worked is because they had really quality grains that hadn't been through the processes that we have now.
Yeah.
But also the fermentation that they did to make their bread actually breaks down walls so that you can get deeper nutrients into your system.
Wow.
Very cool.
So they were not surviving on Wonder Bread. They had deep nutrients that they were accessing from these grains because the fermentation unlocked those nutrients.
That's so cool.
It is.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And it's also suggested again that many of these pioneers survived on a diet largely made of bread. So sourdough, because of its higher nutrient content, is what get them across.
You know,
the
what
plains.
I'm hearing here is it's so sad how we've bastardized grains.
Yes.
So sad. Like there really is so much value to it. And what we have right now is something to line the pockets of massive corporations.
Oh, I love that you just said that.
Because it makes me so angry, because our nutrition and our health it's a marketing gimmick, right? It's to make people money. It's no longer about feeding the nation.
Yeah.
It's putting empty calories that are now destroying our guts and destroying our bodies.
Totally.
And then we just take a medication for that. So now we're feeding two massive corporations, right? Big pharma, big agriculture. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's really sad.
Yes. And I completely agree with what was just said. Now, here's something to think about. Did it start that way? And I would say, I don't think it started that way. And here's why. If we're going to move on the timeline down to war times, which is when everything started changing for the grain game.
World War II, right?
Correct.
Yes.
World War II was when a lot of technological advancements were taking place, because this was a huge war. This was a time when we really needed to like put government funding into things.
Yeah, it was a necessity for survival, really.
A lot of technological advances happened because of wars. And so this is one of those times. In World War II, lab-produced yeast actually started becoming a thing.
Interesting.
The reason why is so that we could make fast bread for soldiers, for other things like that. Again, technological advances because of war.
Right.
No way do I believe that there was an evil overseer wanting that yeast produced.
They didn't know enough
Where
yet.
have we gone with it now?
Right.
Yeah.
What do we know now, and are we not reneging on? That's kind of what I would
Because
say.
like we hit hard with research in the 70s and the 80s, and like scientists were knowing better.
Right.
And they just weren't saying anything.
Because they're like, but we're making money, we can't renege.
Yep. And my boss tells me I can't release this research.
Right.
So I'm not going to.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting that it was a necessity. So they did cut corners, but then like years later, we were realizing, oh, this is probably bad for us.
That's probably where it got a little diabolical.
Now here's the thing too, because Tristan and I talk about Pottinger's cats all the time. Pottinger had cats. And we've mentioned this in the podcast.
We talk about it in most episodes. So this guy Pottinger, he had cats and he was experimenting on their diet. So he took healthy cats and he replaced their natural foods with synthetic, fake food, basically. First generation, they get sick.
Yeah.
Second generation, even sicker. And it just goes on and on and on.
Interesting.
So then they're like, okay, well, we're going to reverse this now. So they put the cats back on natural whole food diets. Took them 4 generations
to get back from a 3-generation.
Even from the first generation.
Really?
Even from 1 generation of bad eating, it took 4 generations of good eating to get back to the health levels.
Which I have my surprise voice on, but I'm not actually surprised.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, because now I'm thinking back to World War II. Those were our grandparents.
Correct.
Right? And so they probably started off with real food.
Correct.
Like the breaking down in their GI tracts started maybe in their 20s and their 30s. They probably didn't feel the effects of that.
They at least had an established gut.
Right. And then we have, so those are our grandparents. And then we have our parents who are now in this, like this change in, the foods and technology. And so Frankenfood started creeping more and more and more into their lifestyles.
Yes.
And then towards their 50s and their 60s, they start to get health issues. Then there's our generation who we are getting sick in like late teens, 20s and 30s and 40s.
Now 13, 14 years old.
It was just my beginning teen years.
Right. But like everything like hit rock bottom in like your 20s and your 30s. And that's what's happening with our generation, right? Everyone, like most people that come to our clinic are like 30s.
Yeah.
And they're like, I've been on this medical merry-go-round for like 5 to 10 years already. And now what I'm seeing are 5, 6, 7-year-old kids that all have gut issues, autoimmune issues. And I say this all the time, allergies since the 90s, mid 90s has tripled in children.
I believe that.
Like our kids are sick.
Yeah.
And so we were living Pottinger's cats.
Yeah.
And grains was one of the things that like triggered that started that
and
fire.
I believe that.
And grains, like in the standard American diet, that's all we eat. We eat pasta, we eat bread, we eat cereal, we eat, what else do we eat?
Donuts, bagels,
burgers with the buns. Do you know, like everything comes from Frankenstein's grain.
Yeah. Or any packaged good is going to have grain in it.
Exactly.
That's the thing is any packaged good.
So we are in that third generation of Pottinger's cats, but with no reversal.
Yeah.
And we're trying to reverse it now ourselves.
And just to kind of go a little bit more into like our parents' era. So like my parents got married in 1977. I'm only 30, but I'm the youngest child of 8. So it's a lot of kids. But so they're older to be my parents. But so they were married in 1977. During the war times, the Green Revolution started happening. This meant that we started crossbreeding our wheat a ton. We started taking that wolf and turning it into a Chihuahua, hardcore. In fact, a man named Norman Borlaug actually won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. So my parents' generation, 1970. Because of his hybridization efforts.
Wow.
He's credited with saving 1 billion lives across the world because of hybridization of wheat specifically. That shows if we're going to award the Nobel Peace Prize to someone for hybridizing wheat, not only has it been heavily hybridized, but it's been a focus.
Yes.
And do I believe that Norman Borlaug was an evil man? No. He saved billions of lives. Do I believe that we know information that we should probably go back on now? Yes. And even going a little bit more into our parents' generation, 1974 was when glyphosates were really invented. And 1980 was when wheat application of glyphosate started happening in Scotland, which was the first place to do that. And then they started doing that in the Americas and things like that. And then on top of that, we see a resurgence of this hybridization green revolution in the late 80s and early 90s. So we see Nathan Hessing right here, owner of Time Traveler's Bakery, who was born in 1990. That is the cusp of when everything had changed. Finally hit. Everyone in my generation is experiencing this. Everyone born between, from the 90s onward or the 80s, we're, if you or your best friend doesn't have it, like, oh my gosh, you're so lucky.
Amazing, right? Like you don't have like energy issues. Amazing. You don't have to take a nap at 2:00 in the afternoon. That's amazing. Right. It really is amazing when you come across a healthy person now. Actually, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because you'll probably know this, but it was decided that in 1996, that's when they started using glyphosate as the desiccant. And that is when childhood allergies started to like just go through the roof.
I don't know that one for positive, but I believe you, because if we're just going to look at numbers, we know that things have happened since the 90s.
Exactly. And like they were using glyphosate just generally, but then to use it as a desiccant. So you said 10 days before harvest, right?
7 to 10 days before harvest.
To dry it out. So they stopped doing natural drying out. And they started desiccating it with glyphosate. And that started in 96. And now we're all just like leaky gut through the roof.
And you will find, like, if you were to look this up on Snopes.com, for example, like glyphosates, they would say, oh yeah, glyphosates are not really an issue. But you will also find in there that desiccants are used that are not glyphosates, but nonetheless, they're used to kill everything.
Right.
It doesn't have to be labeled glyphosate to be a bad thing. If it's going to kill all the organic material, it's probably not a great thing to ingest.
Exactly. It's like, oh, this is rat poison. It only kills rats. It's safe for you. Oh, no, it's not. So, okay. Well, I feel like, why don't you tell people how they can find you? And we have a discount code. We're going to do a giveaway. Tell people about your company and like, where are your channels? Awesome. How can they get your bread? How can they get your sourdough? How can they buy your flour? Because, and tell them the menu. Like, what do you offer?
Oh yeah. I love this. So we actually are just signing for a storefront in downtown Provo, which we're uber excited about. The grand opening of that storefront is coming in November, but currently anyone can order any product that they want online, as well as come to farmers markets to get it. We are at the Sunset Farmers Markets, so you can look those up on Google. They're in Orem, Utah, as well as Springville, Utah. We also occasionally do other farmers markets around the valley, but Sunset and Sunset Farmers Market, so it's run through the end of October, and then 3 days later is our grand opening. So again, timetravelersbakery.com is where you find any of our product to order it. You can also have it shipped to you. Right now, we currently offer our classic sourdough, which tastes amazing and tastes like white bread, even though it's whole wheat. even though everything that we make is whole wheat. We also have our honey wheat, which is going to taste a tiny bit like a Hawaiian sweet roll. Don't worry, no sugar. We never add sugar to anything unless it's labeled as a dessert, because that's the only place that sugar belongs. Again, you know you're eating it. That's the only time you should be eating it.
Yes.
And so we have, again, that honey wheat loaf, which is only sweetened with honey.
You mentioned cakes. Do you guys make cakes?
We do.
Like, and you have to special order it,
Yeah,
right?
and those cakes we don't currently have for ordering yet. That's going to be something once we have our storefront open.
Yes.
We're going to, do that probably within the month of having it open. Another recipe that we'll be releasing when our storefront opens around that time is our sourdough noodles. They are to die for. Imagine sourdough bread, but like that taste in a noodle form. It gives it this like savory twist.
Amazing.
It's so good. And then we also do a sourdough pie crust, which actually at this point, it's not sour. It is a sweet crust. And we might release one that is actually sour later for like a pot pie or something like that.
Cool.
Nice.
And also you guys, if you order, how do they order and pick up from our store? Because we are actually going to be having you guys, if you want, you can order online and pick up from Provo Health.
Correct.
If you're local.
Yeah.
So,
which is right by Sprouts. Go get your groceries, pick up your bread on the way.
Exactly. Exactly. You guys, it's a no brainer. Also, if you guys go online, and I'm going to have Nathan explain this all to you, we have a discount for you guys. So it's a 10% discount if you use the code Gutsy.
Correct.
Gutsy.
Yep.
And so you can order your bread online. You can order your wheat, have it shipped to you, order your sourdough, have it, or your starter, have it shipped to you with that code and 10% off. Or if you're local and you're like me and you just don't have time to sing to sourdough starter and make your own bread, and you just want it made by the hands of Nathan and his wife, and you just want to pick it up and eat it, then you can order that online as well with that Gutsy discount code and pick it up from Provo Health.
Correct.
So how does that process work?
So you guys will hop online. You'll click shop now. Pretty self-explanatory. Select any product that you want. Put it in your cart. When you're checking out, it's going to say, do you want this shipped to you or do you want to pick it up? You'll select,
perfect.
Hey, I want to pick this up. And of course, you're going to select that you want to pick it up at Provo Health because they're the best and they're right by Sprouts.
And because we're by Sprouts.
Yes.
We're by Sprouts.
And then also on top of that, when you're checking out, it's going to ask for if there's any codes that you want to apply. You're going to just type in Gutsy, Gutsy, and that'll give you that 10% off. And make sure, and again, you'll be selecting that you can pick it up right at their location, and it'll be great.
Awesome. That's so great. I can't wait. And you guys, we have tons of companies that come into our stores that we vet, that we turn away. And so to get bread, you guys, like really, seriously, to get bread picked up from my clinic is saying a lot. Okay. Like I would never allow this if I didn't approve of it. And so this actually has the Juanique stamp of approval.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it does. Like otherwise you wouldn't be on the podcast.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
Be honest.
Oh, for real though.
Like I am not in the business of selling bread, but people love bread. They love it. They love their wheat.
Yep.
And I want people who are on a healing journey to not feel like they are in food prison all the time. You have a better choice.
And your healing journey doesn't have to be the law of Moses.
It doesn't.
It's not a law that says this, yes, this, no.
Yep.
You can listen to your body.
Yes.
You can progress. Like
exactly.
Of course, all learning starts with rule-based learning, but don't think that you have to be stuck there forever.
Exactly.
I love
So
that.
important to not be stuck with rules forever and eventually have those rules be something that your body can answer to.
Exactly.
The key is you just have to be honest with yourself,
Yes.
right? Don't
Yeah.
do something and rationalize it because your body knows you're lying.
Totally.
Exactly.
And I just kind of wanted to bounce off that. This bread is not going to work for everyone. I do not want to pretend that it will work for everyone.
Right.
But here's the thing. If it works for you, it'll change your life.
Exactly.
It changed my life. Like my hair was falling out. I couldn't run for a while. I thought I'd be in a wheelchair.
Right.
Like it changed my life. And I've met so many people that it's changed theirs. And again, I'm not going to say it will or won't work for you, but give it a try.
Exactly.
And you can pick up again the wheat, the bread, any of that at their place, but it could really be helpful for you.
I feel a little bad because our kids, they don't eat a lot of bread. So when we do, and the bread that we've bought until you is the Abigail's oven, right? And I'm like, once a month, that's what they get. And it's gone in like 24 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm fine buying more bread now, having them eat it because they love it. And kids kids need carbs because they're running around all the time. And the one thing I want to leave off on is there's studies that show that omnivores have more gut biodiversity than vegans and vegetarians. Why? Because of the food variety, right? And so we need to, like, I know I said this earlier and I'm going to say it again. Research shows the more variety in foods you have, and grains is part of that, the more gut biodiversity you're going to have, the healthier your immune system, the happier you're going to be. And so if bread is just something you're in love with and you need a clean source, a non-Frankenstein bread, one that's organic. I know this isn't an organic certification, but it meets those standards.
It's organic levels, and it's actually beyond organic levels.
Organic.
We don't run it through the certification process because we want you to actually pay a reasonable price.
Exactly.
But we do certify it ourselves.
Exactly. So if you guys, if you are at the point where you're like, you know what, my gut is healing, I need to reintroduce grains again, I miss baking with flour, then go to timetravelersbakery.com and start ordering and falling in love with grains again.
We'll be uploading a series of classes here within, the next while, and we'd love to teach you. This is something that's important for people to know. So.
Thank you so much. This has been so great.
Before we go, we need to give people the link to the giveaway.
Yes, the giveaway.
Gutsy.ch/bread.
Gutsy.ch/bread. So you're just going to go there. You're going to enter in your details.
Go there, put in your name and your email address.
And we will contact the 5 winners personally, and we'll say, you guys get your sourdough starter because we love you. You guys, thank you for checking in. Nathan, thank you so much.
This was awesome. I'm so glad that I could come. I hope it blesses everybody.
I have learned so much. So anything you want to say, Tris?
No, honestly, you've got to try this bread. You just got to try the bread. Even if you live in Alaska, get the starter. And make some at home. You will not regret it.
And we are currently opening up nationwide shipping. So if that ever opens for your area, give her a try. See how she works for you.
You guys, I can't believe we did a whole podcast episode on bread. Like, I can't believe it.
It's the devil, isn't it?
I never thought this day would come. But I hope there's a lot of happy people out there that are like, you know what? I'm going to try this again. I've healed enough. I'm going to reintroduce it. I'm going to make my life a little bit happier, because food is meant to be enjoyed. Eating healthy is fun. It's enjoyable. It's tasty. All right. And bread is one of those nostalgic ingredients that we've all grown up on. Right. And so hopefully this brings you a little bit of joy.
And we are very excited to hear from all of you about how it goes.
Please tell us, give us feedback and tell us how much you love it. All right. Until next time.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.